Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Empowered to Live podcast, where we grow stronger in faith, walk boldly in purpose, and get real about what it means to live empowered in this world. I am your host, Andrea Rose Butler. Good evening again, and welcome to another Thursday evening, another episode. Thank you all, my faithful viewers, for always being here. And keeping up with the podcast and just letting me know how you feel about the things and the work that we've been doing. So appreciate all of you. Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday evening. And today we will start a new series about growing in faith and fulfillment. And that today, first one is about the purpose in waiting. And I tell you, it's how God moves in these situations. I was away last week and just got back here Tuesday. And my cousin's um, niece had on a shirt that said, "There is purpose in waiting." And I said, "Oh, I like that." I told myself, "I like your shirt." And so, and it just tied kind of right in. And so I was like, "Oh, I need to change the title of the original title that I had for today, and about there is purpose in waiting." We've talked about what to do while you're waiting and all this other stuff before. We had to go back and look at that episode. But today we're going to talk more about the purpose behind waiting and how can you make waiting purposeful. And nobody likes to wait. It's, we live in a society where sometimes we have to wait. We stand in line, you have to wait in lines at the grocery store, at McDonald's, Burger King, wherever you go. You have to wait for, if you go to a restaurant, even if you're cooking your own food, you have to wait. So there are so many different things that we have to wait for. And the question that I think I asked this in the last episode I did about waiting is, how are you waiting? How are you, what's your attitude like while you're waiting? And so what are you doing in that waiting season that we sometimes find ourselves in? And I know that waiting is not just passive. It's not just sitting around and just like, oh, one of these days, this is going to happen, and it's going to drop in and the doors are going to swing open. But waiting is about preparation. Waiting is about, how do I prepare? So what is the purpose? What is the reason behind why God is having me wait? I think I'm ready. I'm ready to jump in. I'm ready to do this. Whether or not you want to write a book, whether you want to get married, whether or not you want to have children, you want to change jobs, you want to go back to school, whatever it is your purpose is, sometimes there is a period where we're having to wait. And that waiting time, can be uncomfortable. Sometimes we can feel that while we're waiting, sometimes, I don't know about you, sometimes you can feel like you're stuck. Like everybody's passing you by, and you are that tortoise, that's on the tortoise on the hare, where the tortoise was moving along and the hares was racing past you, and you just feel like, what's the purpose? Like, why is everybody passing me? Why is everybody, you know glowing up and blowing up, and I'm still stuck in this spot? And like, why is this happening to me? And sometimes we can feel that sometimes God has overlooked us because we're in a season of waiting. And it's not necessarily that God has overlooked you. You're in a season of waiting. That season of waiting is your season of preparation. He's getting you ready. I remember a song years ago that, God is getting me ready for something I can't handle right now. So whatever it is that you feel that your purpose is, God is getting you ready for what He knows that He's called you to. He's getting you ready for the obstacles you may have to face when you reach your place of purpose. And so He has to prepare you. He has to strengthen you for those battles that you can't handle right now. There are some things in our lives that we have to work through. And so again, this is a season of growth. It's a season of development while we are in that purpose, that place of waiting. And I'm not going by any of my notes, so y'all just we just winging it right now. But God, waiting, a waiting season is not a wasted season, and that's one of the things I want you to, if you don't take anything away from today, that your waiting season is not your wasted season. It's a season of you getting ready for what God has for you that you may or may not be ready for or be able to handle. Or maybe you're like, well, I can do this. I've been doing this. But maybe there's growth that's coming and you need your muscles to be stronger in order for you to overcome whatever it is, that next growth period that you're coming to, that you may need to be strengthened, you may need to be prepared. Maybe there's some character stuff that needs to be worked out, that God is forging in that period. Maybe that He is developing you. Maybe there's some lessons that you need to learn. And I even look back and I think about my own life, and I think about, and I've shared before, that I had been working on, thinking about doing all this stuff with some kind of podcast, radio shows, something talk show, years and years. I was getting notes ready. I was doing stuff. I was doing a whole lot of things. I had been on some shows myself, so I learned some things, and there was some stuff in me that I know that God had to get out my need for things to be perfect. So that perfectionism that needed to be worked out, where I needed to let go. And sometimes in our waiting season, God is saying, I need you to let go of some things that you're holding on to. Maybe you've got some hidden fears or some insecurities that if He puts you out there, it would destroy you. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing that we are waiting. It's a good thing. So it's not punishment, it's preparation. And again, waiting is not wasted. I want you to just that God is not punishing you by allowing you to wait. And so people may be passing you, and going ahead of you, and you're like, why am I back here? God, when you're ready to run your race and He's ready to say, and He hits that green light to say go, you may surpass the people who have passed you because it wasn't your season yet. And so He had you waiting and preparing for that moment that He was ready to unveil what He has for you and getting you ready. Sometimes your muscles need to be built up. Your endurance needs to be built up. If you're looking at, maybe you want to start a business, but you don't know how to handle your finances, you don't have good time management, so those are kind of the things that we have to work on while you're in that place of waiting. So what is it that you feel like your purpose is? So this podcast is all about you walking in your purpose. It's for you, my heart is for you to be the man or woman of God that He's called you to, that you are fulfilling the calling that He has on your life, and that you step into that place of purpose. And I know for me, like I said, it took me years. I wasn't good at being in front of the camera, being out front. My social media manager, she's always like, use some pictures. And I'm like, I don't have pictures of me. I like pictures of nature. I'll take pictures of the clouds. I'll take pictures of flowers. I'll take pictures of stuff, birds, all these things. I love pictures of nature. I'll take pictures of other people and things and experiences. But, pictures of myself and some, no, I don't have too many. I had to ask my kids, was like, do y'all have pictures of me with like people? Because I know I never, I was telling her, I said, never crossed my mind to say when I'm with friends or whatever, let's take a picture. Just I'm in the moment. I'm never really thinking about, let's seal this with some pictures or whatever. Never thought about it. And so I don't really have a whole lot of pictures. And so, for me to do this and to now we're in 13 months in, and for me to be in front of this camera, to be talking week after week, it's growth. And God had to work out those insecurities and hidden fears within me. There were some lessons I needed to learn, that I can impart to you about what it means to walk in purpose. What does it mean what is purpose, and how do you know that you're fulfilling it, and how do you get to that place? How do you get from point A to point B? I got my coaching certification a couple of years back during the pandemic, as a matter of fact, and it was something that I had been doing. I had, from my kids were younger, even as a young person myself, people will come to me and ask me about stuff, and I will be giving direction and helping them. I've had people who I've helped, through not knowing it was coaching at the time, start churches, start businesses, go back to school, do all this other kind of stuff, write books, help them, through that process. And I had been doing it, and I never really knew, coaching wasn't a thing. I didn't even know that was a thing, but that's something that I was doing, and I didn't even recognize that this is what I was doing. I was just about helping people, giving advice and giving direction, and helping them, push them when they got stuck, to kind of, hey, let's get on stuck. I had a home group, and that they were women that we would talk about stuff, and they would meet at my house, and we would, I was doing group coaching and didn't even know that was such a thing. And so when we are in that waiting period, that's some of the things that we need to do. We should be helping others, and we may not recognize that the thing that we find joy in, that is our purpose, that is part of our passion. And while you're doing that, you're building up that muscle, of your purpose, so that when the time comes and you're like me and you're in front of the camera, you'll be ready to give. Like I said, I've got notes, but the thing is that it comes out of, and I write all this stuff down, and I do my research, and I write my stuff down and whatever, and then I get it here on the live, and I'm just like, okay, what did I put on this and it just comes out, because God has been preparing me for this season, and it's taken me years. And I was like, why is everybody passing me? Why is all this stuff? I remember, a friend of mine that were stationed together in Oklahoma, led her to the Lord, all this other stuff. And then she started passing the church. She was doing stuff. And I was like, God, what in the world? What? How did she get to this place? I've been saved for a long time. I led her to Christ. I'm not even a minister. I'm just, how did this happen? And she went on, and her has done great things for the kingdom. And I was looking back, and the Lord reminded me, it's like, you are an Andrew. Andrew brought Peter, and you never really hear about Andrew anymore, because that was not his purpose. His purpose was to bring his brother to Christ. And so sometimes our purpose is to do just that. And we may think it needs to be something greater or bigger or whatever it is. And you feel like, I'm just being left behind. I taught her, I taught him, and now they're doing bigger and greater things. That may be your purpose. And maybe there's an opportunity that God was just like, okay, this was the testing ground for you to bring this person to do whatever, so that in the future, and we don't look at it as, they're surpassing me. This is my training ground. I'm training, I'm learning, I'm growing. And that's what matters. That's what counts. It's not about how big or how great it is. And you, again, like I said, you may feel like you're stuck, that everybody's passing you by, that you're in this desert place, that you're hanging in limbo, and you're like, you're forgotten. God hasn't forgotten about you. So I would tell you, and I say to myself, what lessons can I learn in the place that I'm in? What am I getting out of this? What is the lesson? What's the takeaway? You have those meetings, and you have these trainings and all these things. And it was like, what's one takeaway that you can have from this moment? I want you to look at this waiting season to say, okay, God, what is a takeaway for me for this? What is the thing that I need to learn in this moment? What is the thing that you are trying to show me? What is it that you're trying to develop in me? What is the thing that in the area that you're trying to grow me? What is maybe a hidden fear or a hidden um, insecurity or a character defect that I have, that it's not time yet for me to move into where you want me to be, because you have to get me out of this place? And I look at, Joseph. in biblical character. Joseph was 17. He was a young lad when God gave him the vision that his brothers and his parents were going to kneel before him. And can you imagine if it had happened at the place where he was, in his young state of mind, his immaturity? He didn't have any leadership skills. He didn't have any of those things. And so he was prideful. His father had boosted him up and he was just like, I'm the favorite son. Look at me. And, he would tattletale on his brothers and he would do all kinds of things. And so he had to go through a period of waiting from when he was in the pit. And then he went to prison. He was in Potiphar's house. Then he went to prison. And then so there was that maturity had to take place. He had to learn how to use his gift that he had. So he was a visionary, but he didn't know how to handle the vision that he was given. He used his gift to lord it over his brothers of, look, I've got this dream. And so, people resented him because of the fact that he had this dream, he had this gift, but he wasn't mature enough to handle the gift. So he needed to go through that place of purification and maturity in order for him to become the man that he turned out to be. So 17, he went into the pit the first time. He was, 37 when he first got into the palace. And then before then he had that whole time of the years of growth. And so now he's like 40. And then, now he's in this time now where, we're in this season of famine. And so he was prepared and he didn't have that arrogant behavior he did when he was younger, because there was some growth that needed to take place in him in order for him to get to the place where he knew how to handle the situation, but he knew how to handle disappointment, and he knew how to handle, seeing his brothers again and not having the arrogance that he had of youth. We look at David. David also a young man when he was told he was going to be king, but David had some insecurities. He had some fears. He had some things that he had to go through. And then for the type of leader and king that he needed to be, he faced some serious adversities. He faced some personal stuff, some things of his own making, some things of other people, but it grew him up to be the king that God could say, this is a man after my own heart. But he had to go through that season of testings, of trials, of living in fear, of all these different things for him to get to that place where he finally sat on the throne. But he had some experiences that he had to go through, that he had to deal with. So he had to wait all those years and experience. And maybe, you're like me, you've had some serious experiences, where even though your life was in danger, and now you're on the other side and you're like, God, I'm ready to sit on my throne. I'm ready to sit in my purpose, to walk in that purpose, that place that that you have anointed me to be. And you maybe you were anointed when you were younger and you're like, God, when? And God was just like, let me show you the things that I need to get out of you, and the things that I want to do in you. And so ask God to give you clarity during that season. And so one of the things he talks about, that anchor yourself in God's word. Look up the scriptures that relate to your situation, to where God is, and then write them down. And I heard this quote today, and I was just like, I need to engrave that on my heart. It says that whatever you declare, your brain will defend. And so what are you declaring about your life, about your situation? What are you speaking over, yourself, over your life, in this period of waiting? Are you doing it with joy? Are you doing it with bitterness? Are you like the Israelites when they were in the wilderness and there was like, how long did you bring us out here to die? And you're just complaining and murmuring and that and going on and on. Or you're just like, God, I'm in this place of waiting. I don't know what you're doing, but I know that you got a plan for my life. You said a plan to prosper me, not to harm me. And just kind of like declare the words of planning over you. And again, he says that whatever you declare, your brain will defend. So whatever you keep saying over and over again, your brain is going to defend it. And one of the things she was saying, if you're like, my life is a mess, I always make mistakes, It's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy because you keep saying it and then you do whatever you say you're going to do. And so make sure that whatever you're saying about this season, that you're declaring God's word over it, that you're speaking life in the waiting season and not death. So remember to speak life. Practice purposeful stillness. And sometimes your obedience looks like staying still. So what does that look like? I remember when I was in the military, and this is what I acquainted it to. They would call it a command of preparation. And they would like battalion, company, whatever, parade, rest, attend, shouldn't. And so, and so they will call us, and so they will call us, and so we will prepare for the command of preparation, and then there was a command of execution. And so God is calling you, so He called you, and now He wants you to be prepared. And so the time of execution is coming, but you've got to be ready. And so you had to, so when Dave said battalion, company, platoon, whatever, so that call will come down the line, from battalion to platoon to company. And so we would prepare ourselves, and the echo of that will come through. And so so everybody moved into that place of preparedness in order for us to execute it. And so for you, you may be in that place of the command of preparation. God is saying, get ready. And then now He's going to say, take action. And so we're in that place of preparedness. So we are obedient to the call and the learning that needs to take place in order for you to grow. And then, like I said, serve while you wait. So look for opportunities to serve. I had been serving. I had been doing what I didn't know was coaching for years. And people would come to me, and I would, like I said, I would help them in situations. We'll talk about financial stuff. People ask me about, about what health insurance they should sign up for. We'll kind of sit down and kind of go through it. Kids will ask me, friends will ask me on the job. People will come to me, and I was just like, don't you have parents at home? And some of them will be my age or older, and they're like, I don't know. I never experienced this. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to do this. How do I go about doing that? And then kind of walking them through the steps of doing that, serving. In my church, I told y'all, I was like, put me in the kitchen, put me in the back room. I don't want to be in front, whatever. I'll clean toilets, sweep the floors, whatever. But find ways to serve. What is it that you think, that you believe that God is calling you to do? And then find opportunities to serve in that area. If you want to be a writer, but you're not a reader, you've got to be able to read. What kind, read the genre that you want to write in. What are you trying to do? Find writers that encourage and inspire you. You want to go back to school, do that research. If you want a good student and you're like, but I just want to go back to school, why? But you weren't a good student when you were in school before. And so why would you want to go back to school? Why would you want to subject yourself to that? Maybe it's an apprenticeship so you can do what you needed to do, and not necessarily that you need to sit in the classroom. So there's so many different things that you want to do. You want to be a parent, but you've never babysat a child. You got to be able to take care of kids, but you've never done childcare. Serve in the nursery at church. Volunteer on doing something to get taking care of kids. You want to be married, but you're like, God, I'm ready, but you don't cook. You don't keep your house clean. You don't do anything. It's like, so there's some preparation. There's some things that you have to do to get ready. Maybe you're just like, maybe you're selfish. And you're like, but I want to be married. So that's not going to work out. So there's some things that God has to work out in you to get you ready to be in that place. So whatever it is that you want to do, sit with it. I'm going to tell you, write it down. So kind of sit, okay, God, this is what I know, go back and look at my thing about SMART goals and smarter goals. So we had a couple series on purpose and goal setting, write them down. What is it that you feel that God is calling you to do? And in this season of waiting, saying, God, what lessons are you trying to impart in me? What is it that you're trying to do inside of me? Why I'm not yet ready to step into whatever it is that you've called me to do. There's a purpose behind it. So what is that purpose? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to work out in me that I have not yet surrendered to you in that area? What is it that I need to do till I get to that place of walking fully in purpose? And like I said, it may take you, it could be a sudden work. It could be some deep work that needs to take place. Maybe there's some inner healing that needs to take place, some things that you have not addressed from your past that needs to be addressed. And then God was just like, we need to work this out. But every time I come near it, you're like out and you step back. And he's like, I need to heal you here in order for you to do this, because I don't want you to take this into the next season. So I want you to be healed. I want you to be whole. And so you have to allow him to touch those places that may not be fully healed. I told you before, I'm working out some stuff. I'm some childhood trauma and some dysfunction and some other stuff that's in me that I know that are still there. That still, people touch it and I'm like, ouch. There's still work, but I've come a long way. And so I know there's more ways to go, but he's working that out. He's working that out in me. And so I'm grateful for the work that has already taken place. Like I said, for me to be in front of this camera and not knowing if anybody's watching, if anybody cares, it is growth for me, because I was like, nobody's going to watch this. Nobody's want to hear from me. And I'm not going to do this and yada, 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 and all that stuff. But I'm just at this place right now when I know that this is what God called me to. And like I said, we are in month 13. And I'm like, God, whatever it's doing, whoever it's touching, and even the growth and the changes, that how far we have come, and how I first started out to where I am today. I know that God is working. He's preparing me for some other things. And as I'm growing and as I'm yielding or attempting to yield to his leading and allow him to do that work in me and through me, and I'm still serving, I'm still doing what I know I need to do. So even though I'm prepared in some areas, there's still some preparation that needs to take place. And so that's why I can share with you that God, I'm in the waiting season. There are things that, I've prayed about that I have not yet been fulfilled. There's still some answered prayers that's still out there. There's still some dreams that I have that still have not come to fruition yet. And I'm just like, God, I believe you. I trust you. I know that you promised me that you're going to do these things. And so I'm just going to wait and see. I'm just going to wait and see. I'm not going to be like, let me go see for myself and let me go fix this or let me do this. And we end up with Ishmael. No, I want the fulfillment of the promise. I don't want an Ishmael. I want the Isaac, sorry. So I want the real deal. And so I'm not going to go out here and try to push. I'm going to wait and allow God to grow me up in the areas that I need to grow up in, and heal me in the areas he needs to heal me in, and takes off some stuff. And there's some things still I need to let go of it. And so there's just a lot of things. And so for like you and I, we know that, like I said, he's got a good plan for us. And so we've got to declare what we want to see, because again, our brain will defend the things that we declare. So what are you declaring? What are you saying? What are you allowing to come out of your mouth during this season? So I just want to encourage you. Again, waiting time is not wasted time. This is all about learning and growing. Waiting is not punishment, it's preparation. And so he is going to do a great work in and through you. And I believe that. So if this episode has blessed you, like, share, share with your friends. Again, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And so we're also, again, still working. I was away for a couple of weeks, and so I've been to get back into moving my shows over to Spotify. And so hopefully I'll get all of that done before the end of this year. It's a tedious process because the way you set up with Facebook and trying to get them over to Spotify and all this other stuff it's interesting. But getting those moved over And so we'll be on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and so there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of things is coming, a lot of growth. Also, if you are a mental health professional, I would like to connect with you for a series that I want to do, um, a pre-recorded session of a kind of a. I want to do a live and then a pre-recorded session on talking about mental health, especially when it comes to mental health and um, the believer, and just kind of especially those in the African American diaspora, but just touching on all of that about mental health in the church, our response to that, what people can do, how we can respond to that, and then kind of just some help to people to encourage them. So if that's you, you can reach out to me, sending me a direct message. You can also go to our website and message me there. I look forward to hearing from you, and just look forward to being able to do that. We're also looking at another financial series coming up, especially as we get closer to the end of the year in preparation for 2026, Lord willing. So those are kind of some things that we have come around the pike. Wanted to have this kind of like a roundtable where I go live with some other folks, be able to answer your questions live on air. So if that's you, just let me know. I would love to connect with you and to collaborate. Well, that's all I have for tonight. So thank you all again for another episode of Empower to Live, where faith and purpose align. Good night and have a great one. See you next week. Bye bye.